Okay, I think we're live on Facebook, and today I am so excited and thrilled to not only see again, but to have with us my dear friend Cindy Sadler, contralto extraordinaire, uh, spanning the entire repertoire from musical favorites like Phantom of the Opera to some of the most demanding contralto rep in the operatic canon, but also a phenomenal teacher, an advocate for young artists. What we met singing in a church choir together, right? We were at the St.
Yes, we
David's
did.
Episcopal Church with David Stevens back in the day in Austin, Texas. And
Back in the day.
thank you so much for being here. How are you? You're in Austin, Texas now, yeah?
I am in Austin, Texas as we speak,
And y'all holding up
surviving the
okay with
tail end
the
of.
Vortex Part 2? I mean, we had, my gosh, I was in Chicago 2 years ago when we had that polar vortex where we went from 50 degrees to negative 50 wind chill in a matter of like 24 hours, which was insane. But I think they're
Oh,
more
was that
prepared
the
for that.
one? Was that the one when all the cars just got abandoned?
Oh yeah. I
And
mean,
yeah,
everything.
I
I
I
mean,
remember that.
when downtown Chicago decides to close up because it's too cold, I think that that's pretty significant. They're kind of prepared
I,
for it. But
I would say so. I used to live
oh
right on the lakefront, so yeah, I know from Chicago cold, but it
my
didn't get that cold while I was there, thank God.
Yeah,
Uh,
I will say that here in Texas, we are a bit less prepared for that type of wintry mix, snow, ice, etc. And I think that I don't know. Some might think that we just, I don't know, aren't used to it, but really the infrastructure is just not even built for it. So when it does happen, it really becomes, a significant mess. You know.
I've been enjoying the concern and of the kind concern of many of my friends who live up north or live in colder climates who are very generously trying to offer advice. And I keep saying, yeah, we're doing that already. We're doing that already.
Yeah,
No, you don't
everyone's like,
understand.
make sure that you
Houses,
run a leaky faucet, let your faucet drip. Like, yes, okay, of
just
course. Yes, we
we
know,
know
know
that
something.
here, but the problem is the pipes aren't insulated. They're not, they're on the outside wall. So we have all
Yeah.
kinds of crazy rigging up to try to keep our pipes warm. And we've got electricity now. We've got heat, but our water is out. So
Oh.
I come to you unshowered but unbowed.
Well, you look beautiful as ever. We
Well,
too are
thank
under
you.
the water boil order or whatever it is, and it's just a mess. And hopefully not for much longer, but they've got to kind of play catch up here, I think. Oh, Dean Anthony is with us. Hi, Dean.
Dean, hi.
What a guy. What a guy.
Love me
So
some Dean.
I know, right? Who doesn't? Who doesn't? My goodness. Well, let's get into it. How did you get into music in the first place? How did you get started in singing? What was that path? How did that look? How was that forged?
Well, I've always been in music because I was born into a musical family.
Oh, okay.
My mother wanted to be a band director, and back at the time when she was in school, she went to University of Texas, Hook'em Horns, and but she ended up leaving to get married to my dad. So that was kind of the end of her band director dream. Now I do want to say that she is at age, oh, I better not say her age, but she's still playing her clarinet and she's still playing in a band, so I'm very proud of that.
She and
And
Gerke could get
so,
together and play some clarinet duets. My guest
oh, I
last week.
didn't know.
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't
Chris.
know Gerke was a clarinetist.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She's got the
Oh,
whole
okay.
woodwind family sitting there. So yeah, that's great.
That's
Another
awesome.
clarinetist.
So it was really important to my mom that we all learn how to read music. She did not consider that we would be literate if we
Hmm,
did not know how to read music,
good for her.
a viewpoint that I wish more people took these days. And so we all had piano lessons. And I also learned to play guitar, and I played Irish folk harp for a little while. And
Sorry, what is an Irish folk harp?
well, it's a harp, but it doesn't have pedals usually. It's just sort of, and they come in all different sizes, and
Oh,
you can only play them in a couple of keys because they don't,
I
unless you
thought
put a capo on it.
I thought
Unless
you
you
were
put a
going to say
capo
you
on it.
can only play them in Ireland. an Irish folk harp can only be played in Ireland. That's what the distinctive
I
characteristic.
hope not, because I have one downstairs. Um,
That's
I don't
funny.
play it very often, but I do have one.
Yeah.
So and then I was an oboist. I played oboe in band,
Now,
and
wait. When did this all start? When did you start learning to read music and
oh,
playing
I
the
learned to read music before I was in school.
like 3, 4 years old?
Well, I mean, we always had music going in the house. We always had music playing. Mom took me to, well, we always went to see the Nutcracker every year. So it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
in this, and we'd go to see the symphony. So it was very music, classical music was always playing in our house, but all kinds of music, really. And I had a neighbor lady who took me to see musicals,
Okay.
which I loved. I don't know why she chose me, but from the time I was very small, she would take me to see high school musicals that her daughters were in and stuff like that.
That's
And I just
nice.
loved it, and plays and all kinds of things. So I had a very cultural upbringing, but opera was not part of it.
Hmm.
However, I was also raised in the Church of Christ, which,
Uh-huh.
for those who don't know, is a non denominational evangelical church that has no instrumental music. And you sing 4-part, 6-part a cappella harmony. And it's fun. It's really fun singing. I mean, it's all about hellfire and brimstone, and and well, not all about it, but but it's that old Foursquare job Stamps Baxter hymns,
Mhm.
and they're a blast to sing. And I
Mhm.
can still sing every verse from every song in the hymn book. Um, and so I sort of learned to sing a little bit from that and to
Yeah.
harmonize. But training singing was never part of my worldview. It was
Mhm.
just something you did. And I was the only person in my family that really could sing
Yeah.
at that time. Although my older brother has developed, both my brothers also have very nice voices, and they're not, my little brother's had lessons. He's sort of a light baritone. My older brother could have probably been an opera singer, but that's just not his thing.
Okay.
But anyway, so when I got into school, I was not a music major. I went through a variety of different majors, but I played music for fun. And I was living in one of the women's co-ops at the
Now,
University of Texas.
I was just going to say, you did your undergrad at University of Texas?
Went to the University of Texas, yeah, and I started out. I was living in one of the women's co-ops there, and it called Pearson, and then later I moved into the one called, ready for it, Valhalla.
Hello.
So the foreshadowing. And there I met this funny little woman, and we ended up, who also played guitar, and we both were interested in folk music. And I had at the time a big interest in Irish folk music. And I'd been playing my guitar and singing all through high school and stuff. And I had a range of about an octave.
1 octave.
But it was about C4 to C5 was about it.
Right. Right.
And so one day we got hired to do the annual Madrigal dinner. And as we were rehearsing, as we were auditioning for the woman who was in charge of it, she said to me, you have a really good voice. Have you ever had voice lessons? And I said, what are voice lessons?
Why would
I
you do
didn't
that?
realize. It never occurred to me that you could take lessons to learn how to sing the way you could take lessons to learn an instrument, because my whole life up to that point had been instrument focused.
Were
Singing
you
was
in
just
band
something
in high
you
school?
did. I was in band. I was oboe player. I was always
Okay.
first chair.
Yeah.
I was the flag captain in the marching band. So yeah, I was really into it.
Good.
But I never enjoyed practicing.
The oboe.
The oboe. I was very lazy about it.
Mm.
So when this woman said, you should consider taking voice lessons, that was sort of opened up a whole new world to me. And I marched myself down to the music building, and I spoke to Leonard Johnson,
Mhm.
the late Leonard Johnson, who was the tenor faculty there at the time. Very kind, very dear man. And, he had me come in and sing for him just to see. And I didn't expect to be singing anything. I'd just gone in to inquire. And he said, well, just sing something. And so I think I sang My Country 'Tis of Thee, which was
Sure.
The only thing
Sure.
I could think of off the top of my head. And he said, "Well, you have a really good voice. You're not a major, so I'll have to put you with a grad student. But if we
Right.
can't find a grad student for you, I'll teach you." So, long story short, he found a grad student for me. It was a tenor named Timothy Snyder, and I studied with him for a year and really loved it. It was just something that just sort of turned on inside me when I
Mm.
started learning. Something just connected. And the funny thing was that I did not love opera. I loved singing classically. I loved the sensation of how you involve your entire body in it. And this was before I understood what it meant to really involve your entire body. But even just at that beginning stage, learning to use my whole body.
Did you
And
find any similarities or significant differences between how you used your body to play oboe than you did to how you used your body and breath to sing?
I did not at that time, but as my technique grew, I realized that there's a lot of similarity there, because oboe and any double reed instrument takes a lot of air
Hmm.
and requires that you really use your support. And the funny thing was, is my instrumental teachers I always had, I had a couple of different ones, and they would always say things to me like support from your diaphragm, but nobody ever tells you what that means.
It's one of my I know. I mean, if someone if someone says that and then for whatever reason the student on the other side goes, "Oh, I know what you mean. Okay." And then they're able to find the appoggio, the leaning down upon the breath or the body that instigates that type of, full-bodied singing. If that's what they take away from that phrase, whew, thank God. But so, I mean, how often do we know where people say that phrase? Sing in the mask, sing from your diaphragm. I know what they mean, but it's so unfortunate that those have become these catchphrases where it's like, do you want to try to say exactly what you mean by that? You know what I mean?
I will tell you that I have yet to encounter anybody who knows what that means. Um, and has been, because every time, that's one of my trick questions when I start teaching. One of the first things I ask students is, tell me what you know about singing.
Mhm.
Pretend that I'm one of your friends who you're going to teach how to sing, and tell me what you know.
Yeah.
And they always get this terrified look on their faces.
And they say, well, you have to sing from your diaphragm.
You sing from your diaphragm.
It's like, sorry,
And then,
pretend like I don't know what that means, the same way you don't.
yeah. And I said, okay. And what does that mean? And then they really get terrified because nobody knows what it means. It doesn't mean anything, really. So, that's one, I love taking that approach. Is my point is not to catch people out,
No,
but
no.
rather to get them to really think about it. And then we usually do a little vocal anatomy, and then I start explaining it to them the way I understand it.
Sure.
Um, and anyway, so yeah, I see. You back to the oboe question. Yes,
Yeah.
it's very similar. The support is very similar, and also the embouchure, because you will sometimes see people. Pardon this is my oboe.
There's your
You'll see
straw.
people who play the oboe like this. I
Uh-huh.
don't know how they do it, because I was taught that you play it like this, and
Uh-huh.
it's very loose, except for just a little bit of tension in your lips, which is similar to the way we sing. We don't want a lot of tension in our lips when we
Right.
sing.
Right.
I don't even know how you could do it. It looks very funny.
Not very well.
Yeah. So as I started to understand more and more about how you balance your body and connect to everything, and then just sort of let it go and put it all out of your mind. The best thing, of course, is when people discover how little work you actually do.
I'll
That
say
it's
it again. My
and what I
favorite,
always
I'm sorry to interrupt. My favorite quote from Lamperti's Vocal Wisdom is the difficulty in learning how to sing is finding its simplicity. I use that quote so often because you're exactly right. So often when a student has a breakthrough, they'll sing something and then, I'll say, or whoever will say, oh my God, that sounds fantastic. Oh, that doesn't feel like I'm doing anything. Great. You get it.
Right. Ding, ding,
Right.
ding. The phrase I like to use is, well, for one thing, I start off by saying, look, singing is very zen. It's not about force, it's about balance. And finding balance is much harder than finding strength.
Hmm.
Developing balance is much harder than developing muscular strength.
Absolutely.
So, and it's harder to learn too. It's harder to learn what balance feels like. So that's one of the big challenges that I think that faces young singers, and also in particular faces big voices.
Yeah.
Because as you know, one of the great temptations in big voices, especially because people are always saying, oh yes, you have a big voice, is to, well, I must then sound big. Because if I don't, then,
Yeah. Yeah.
then who even am I? So, that's one thing that young, bigger, more dramatic voices, or just heavier, darker voices, have to be on the lookout for. Is not trying to
And
manufacture that sound.
it's always it's so surprisingly interesting when people start to realize that one acquires that power through breath, right? It doesn't have anything to do with muscular effort. Zero. And I
Right.
think that, when you talk about that balance, to me, in my mind, I'm thinking of balancing the phonation with the airflow, right? You have to make sure that one of them doesn't overpower the other, depending on where you are in your range, right? And I think that breath is so monumentally important to understanding that balance. And I think so often young singers, they hear, some type of singer that they, idolize or really find a passion for, and they think that in order to sing that way, I must have to force something, right? I mean, it's the
Hmm.
same thing if like you watch a golf shot that drives 350 yards, you think you have to knock the living crap out of that ball. No, 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 no. It's like the exact opposite. So yeah, I
Hmm.
love what you're saying with that. So as you started in your trek of learning to sing, um, what were some of those initial hurdles that you sort of ran into that you had to kind of work out and sort of, I don't know, organize in your mind to work more efficiently to find that balance?
Well, I was very fortunate to land on Mignon Dunn as my primary undergraduate teacher. I had teachers before her, but she's the person that I feel like I learned the most from.
Okay.
And and we had similar voices. Um, and that certainly helped. And she was not big on talking about technique, but I felt like we sort of, this is going to sound very woo woo, and I guess it is, but we often just, I would just watch her, and she would sort of telegraph to me as I was singing. And I kind of learned just from watching, a lot of ways, watching her facial expressions. And she did talk technique with me and everything, but then
Sure.
she would cue me, by just responding to what I was doing, which is really
Sure.
interesting. And I have found that I tend to do that too.
Yeah.
It has become really obvious to me when I'm on Zoom and I'm watching my students and I'm going,
Have you seen that? Have you seen that video of that? Like, it's some sort of like church recital or something, and the teacher is like 80 years old, and she's in the back of the room, and she's like, the kids singing "Caro Mio Ben" or something. I love
yeah,
it. I love it. But yeah, we can't help.
yeah,
It's like we all have these little things. I like to think up and back with this reverse megaphone. So every time in studio class, I'm like,
yeah,
there you go, there you go.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and directing this, send that sound out there,
All
send
right,
it out, spin. Um,
right. So these were really
so
helpful. I mean, Mignon Don. I mean, so did you start? You began studying with her after the graduate student you were initially put with.
yeah, I was only with him for a year, and then I switched to being a music major because even though I still didn't care for opera that much and I had no idea what I was going to do with a music degree, I loved singing and I loved it more than anything else I had done. And
Did you have a major before you switched to music?
I switched majors two or three times. I started out as an advertising major. That didn't last very long. And then I was a journalism major, and that didn't last very long. And I think it was after that I switched. I was a junior when I switched to music, and my parents didn't care. But
Oh,
what we have to understand is that this was at a time when if you were an in-state resident, your tuition was $500 a semester.
At UT.
Yeah.
Things have
As
changed.
things have changed a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents are not wealthy, and we didn't know anything about opera, and I went about everything about as ass backwards as you possibly could, and sort of backed into having a technique and a career. But when I started with Mignon, she was the teacher for me.
Sure.
And the other interesting thing was she was still very much singing at the Met all the time. So she'd be gone for a month, and then you'd come in and you would get like 4 or 5 lessons with her. And then she'd go off again for another month. And, that's not the most recommended thing for a undergrad. And yet none of us had any problem working with her, and actually, I thought it was good training because, we know realistically in the real world, you do not get a voice lesson and a coaching every week.
No.
You're lucky if you get one once every 3 or 4 months. Sure. So it was good training, and I just taped everything, and I'd go in the practice room and I just work with those tapes and warm up with them. And I still do that today. I still listen to my lessons.
You still have a cassette tape deck?
I've graduated from cassette tapes a little bit to.
It's so amazing because when I first started, I had my little cassette tape and we would record the lesson, and you leave it out in the car too long and whoops, there went the lesson.
There went the lesson. I have an entire drawer of cassette tapes I just can't let go of and they're nothing but old voice lessons. Occasionally, I do still have something that plays them, and occasionally I'll go listen to one and it's a hoot because I sound like a 15-year-old soprano. There's just like no chest voice there. It's all, so I feel like she gave me a really good foundation. The breathing wasn't a problem because Mignon is the queen of breathing and support. And she passed that on to me. It was always just sort of
specific exercise or like a specific sort of, how would you summarize what she teaches with breathing?
This is funny. I don't remember specifically what she taught with breathing, although I remember exercises. And I still use some of her exercises. I'm sure a lot of people still use, exercises from. But I remember one of the things, doing lots of work with staccati, and to really get that sense of how low you have to engage the abdominal muscles, and isolate them from what you're doing in above that. And doing them like in arpeggios up and down the scale. There was another one that she made me do a lot, which I still use. I find it very useful, and it's useful for a couple of things. It's useful for getting your voice going when it doesn't want to go.
Yeah.
We all have those mornings when we wake up and the voice is like, no, I'm going to stay in bed, okay? Or your breath just isn't underneath you. You wake up and it just for what you cannot get your breath going. So I find staccati to be really, really good for working with that. And the other thing it's great for is teaching lower voices to get in and out of their passaggio without taking the weight up. And for kind of learning how to just learning where your passaggio is, and where that real, there's always that one real breaking point there. There's somewhere it's just it starts to feel shaky, and then there's the one that just, if you don't negotiate it just right. So
you do it on specific vowels, or is it?
I like to do it on whatever vowels the student is comfortable with. And that's different, as you know, for different voices. So I will start. What Mignon did was she would start with an ah. So it goes like this. It goes, and I'm not warmed up, so God knows what's going to come out.
Please.
Ah, 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 hee, 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 oh, 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 something like that. So and just going through different vowels, and as you get higher, altering those vowels. So one of the things that was hard for me as a young singer, as a young mezzo, was the E vowel. I had to conquer the E vowel. And once I did, it's now my favorite valve to sing because it's perfect for lining things up and for checking whether you're taking too much weight on things, and just basically learning how to balance your voice.
Yeah. Well, it's
But
certainly the
until
best
you get
valve to
to
get
that point,
closure. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's the best valve to get the closure in the chords for sure. And I think that oftentimes, I mean, I came from a place, even as recently as, maybe 15 years ago. I mean, I was, well, I don't know, 8, 10 years into my career, and I was accidentally abducting my chords instead of adducting them. I mean, thankfully, I'm a strong guy and I was able to kind of keep it together. But once I learned the whole efficiency of chord closure and which vowels can help benefit that. So, E vowels and just anything higher on the front side or the back side of the vowel chart, other than ah, especially through the passaggio. That was for me a huge sort of light bulb moment. So yeah,
yeah.
helping you line things up is exactly right.
Now, when I was starting out, ah vowels were easier for me because,
Hmm.
again, remember, I didn't have much of a range. So,
Hmm.
and I had this sort of, you were talking before about people with God given natural talent before
Sure.
we got on here. Um, I had a natural ability with the lower passaggio.
Hmm.
It didn't give me a lot of trouble at first,
Okay.
just because my voice sits so low. And my break is a little bit lower than like most mezzos. And I thought of myself as a mezzo for most of my career. I've since started calling myself a contralto, and that was a
Okay.
deliberate choice. But I've always been somewhere in the middle of those two. I have a
Sure.
very low range. I can sing well down into the tenor range, and I also have top notes. So,
Hmm.
which actually
What's
is
your
it's not uncommon for contralti to have really high extensions, as it
right,
turns
right.
out.
Yeah.
Um,
What's your least favorite note to sing? What is that note for you that's like that's the one that I ugh.
the ones that you always have to watch out for are B flat and B,
Hmm.
either in the middle or in the top.
Okay.
Once you get past those, it's golden.
Right.
Once you getting up to those is golden. Um, but it's just, and the bottom one's not a problem. It's the middle and the top. And I know
Yeah.
some people say, "Oh, there's no such thing as a middle passaggio." But if you're a mezzo or contralto, I beg to differ. There certainly is.
Yeah.
It's not as pronounced.
Yeah. I mean, even
Um,
I mean, as a baritone, I certainly understand if I don't sing my primo passaggio well, then when I get to the actual passaggio, I have a lot more work to do, right? So for me, my E flat and my E natural above middle C, those are very, very tricky notes, and it's very easy to accidentally sing them a little too much like I'm singing an F or an F sharp, or to sing them a little bit too much like I'm singing a B natural B flat. It's one of those things.
Well, for me, the hard part was learning how not to fall out of line on those notes.
Hmm.
And I have discovered since then teaching mezzos and contraltos, it's the same thing every time. That B and B flat right there in the middle are very hard for people to learn to line up. And you have to really learn to feel it. And I believe we were talking before about imposing stuff, how people listen to music and try to imitate it. And
Sure.
I'm a big, big believer in learning to sing from the inside out. And
Absolutely.
this is something that Mignon always used to say to me. She said, "Don't listen to it, Shotzi. Feel it." And we talk about what it felt. And I remember the first time I had a really big breakthrough in her studio. Um, I don't remember what I was singing, but it was something that was a little bit higher. And she said, and I was doing all kinds of lyric mezzo stuff at that time. And she said to me, "That's it. That's the way you sing that." And I said, "Oh, that's my Mozart voice." And I had hung this little tag in my mind on this. To me, it sounded very soprano-y.
Uh-huh.
It sounded very light, and it sounded like very free, like I wasn't really doing much, which we also talked about. And she said, "Well, sing your Mozart voice all the time."
Yeah.
So I had this and very common misconception that I had to be working harder to produce more sound, when the opposite is true. When you are really producing some really big sound, it doesn't sound like much on the inside.
Not at all.
it sounds almost kind of whiny.
Hmm. Hmm.
It sounds very small, and it's really hard to reconcile that. So once I learned that I needed not to trust my ears, but I needed to trust what this felt like and what the
Hmm.
space in here felt like.
Hmm.
That was a big eye opener for me, and I was really able to progress from there because by the time I left my undergraduate, I had very smooth registration all up and down. That was one of the things that the teachers was pretty consistent feedback I got from people,
That's great.
that my registration was smooth. And now, granted, I was older than a lot of undergraduates. I was a couple of years older because I'd already been in school for a few years before I ever took voice lessons or started singing.
Okay.
But I only went to grad school for one semester, and then I got into the Chicago program. So
Did you stay at
there,
UT for grad school?
no, I went for one semester to the University of Illinois
Oh,
in
okay.
Champaign-Urbana, and I went there because Mignon basically transferred there, and she was doing so well for me, and I loved her and still love her to this day, that I did not want to leave. I thought, why change? I'm not done with her yet.
Right, right, right.
It turned out to be, yeah. So I was there for one semester. Absolutely hated it, not because of her, but or because just the first year of grad school is really tough.
Yeah, yeah.
First time I'd really lived away from home for a long time. I did not like Champaign-Urbana, which at that time was really a little crossroads out in the middle of the cornfields. Now it's a beautiful little city. There's a lot to do there. It's all developed. At that time, it was not.
Mhm.
And anyway,
So you
but
got
I
into
only had to.
the Lyric Opera Center of American Artists, now known as the Ryan Opera Center.
Yes, I did, and so. and the thing I think is funny is I got into it singing Non più mesta.
Well, that is not the rep that I think of, or I think anybody might think of when they think of Cindy Sadler singing.
I've never really done a lot of Rossini professionally. I've done Zulma in Italiana in Algeria a couple of times.
Sure.
I've done Berta in Barber of Seville,
Yeah.
but I don't do a lot of Rossini.
Hmm.
I wish I did. I had one opportunity. I was cast as Isabella in Italiana,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were going to do it with like a Marilyn Horne type,
Sure.
version of
Sure.
her, which used to be the standard, and now there are all these beautiful, slender lyric mezzos. And I'm not bitter, really, but I gave it up to take a ring cycle.
Hmm.
So talk about your choices, your Sophie's choices. I gave up Rossini, which I dearly love,
Yeah.
to do my first Erda, and and that turned into 2 ring cycles for me, and I sort of that was definitely the right choice. But I've always regretted not being able to do that Italiana.
Wow. Wow.
um,
Edward Park says hello to both of us.
Hi, Ed.
Ashraf
How are
Sorum
you?
says hello to both of us. Richard Files loves this. Stephen Gartner. So glad that these folks are tuning in. This is great.
Hey, Stephen. Stephen and I were at Brevard together
Oh, just last
back
year.
in the
Yeah,
day.
2 years ago. Hmm.
Yeah, just a couple of years back.
Right. Just a few years.
Yeah.
So
But
when let's say this, when you were at Loca for 2 years, 3 years?
no, I was only there for one, and
Oh,
the reason was that there was a changeover. I could say this now. I mean, I have nothing to lose. The new person who came in to run the program, I always felt didn't like me.
hmm.
And I was at that time. It was a 2-level program, and I was in the lower level. So
Oh,
you
okay.
sang in you were called an apprentice. You
Uh-huh.
sang in the chorus.
Hmm.
Which the good thing about that for me was I was AGMA, and I made plenty of money. I made more money than the people in the actual upper level of the program
Right.
because
Okay.
of AGMA,
Sure.
and got my AGMA card, pretty easily.
Right off the bat.
Yeah, and I didn't get to do a whole lot other than some concerts, and I got to do one of the Handmaidens and Turandot and stuff like that, but it was just I didn't get to do all that much.
Okay.
And at the end of the year, after we did auditions, they were not going to continue me into the next level of the program,
Right.
and which is fine, but they had changed what being an apprentice meant.
Mm.
And it felt like less opportunity to me. And I felt like, given the fact that I didn't feel like the person who was running the program at that time really supported me, I didn't feel like it was a good reason to stay. And I thought,
Yeah.
I feel that I've got this on my resume. I'm pretty young. I'm going to take this and just see what I can do with it.
Yeah.
And so as I was working out the rest of my contract, one of the women in the chorus, Jean Seidel, was an agent, and she set up an audition for me for Phantom of the Opera. And they were asking for you to sing operatic arias, not
Okay.
musical theater.
Okay.
So I got to sing for Cameron McIntosh, the producer of Phantom of the Opera,
The
in
original.
a studio, and I sang the lullaby from the console.
Yeah.
And he was very lovely, very delighted. And he said, "Well, you have a terrific voice, and next time I want to hear you sing something higher." And then I didn't hear anything for about a year. Um, and then and I had gone off. I went off after Central City. I did a fall staff with Chicago Chamber Opera, which is this wonderful little company that was there at the time. And then I went to Central City to be an apprentice for the summer. And then I came back to Chicago thinking, well, I like Chicago. I'll get my career started here. And I had just moved into a new apartment, and I was wondering what the heck I was going to do with myself. And I got a call asking if I could come to New York and audition for Hal Prince and Cameron.
There you go.
So I went to New York. I did my audition in some Broadway theater or another. I don't remember which one. And they asked me if I could sing Carlotta's cadenza, if I knew it.
Hmm.
And I said, well, I don't know it, but if you have the music on hand, I'll go learn it and come back. I just need about 15 minutes. And they said, no, that's okay. But they were actually considering me as a Carlotta cover,
Okay.
which is crazy. And at the time, I could have done it. If you're not familiar, Carlotta is a soprano, and she sings these very high, crazy color tira cadenzas.
Yeah.
And I could have hit all those notes. I could have sung it. But I probably would have ruined my voice after a while, because 8 shows a week,
Yeah.
So I'm glad that didn't work out. But they did invite me to join the cast of Phantom of the Opera out in LA.
Oh, wow.
And so I had been in this apartment like all of 2 weeks. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I've got to break this lease. We're going to lose some money. But I need you to come up here and help me drive out to LA. So my mom came, and I gave away or sold or, packed up everything I had. And I drove out to LA and I learned the Phantom score in the car.
Wow.
We stopped at a Walmart, like the smallest, dingiest Walmart I've ever seen, out in West Texas somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the one store in the whole town. And we stopped there, and I bought a little keyboard back when you could just walk into Walmart and buy these little keyboards. This was in
Right.
like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Isn't that weird how hard it
And
is to find little keyboards nowadays?
you can't find them.
I mean, thankfully
I,
there's, we have our keyboards on our phones, but I mean, you can't really find just a small little, the people that do
I
have
used to
them are
take
like,
it everywhere I went. And I had a
yeah.
little one. In fact, I haven't thrown it away yet, but it just finally stopped working. So that thing has been around since like 1989,
Yeah.
still working. But anyway, so I stopped and I learned the score in the car, because I was still thinking opera. I was thinking you show up with it learned. I didn't realize that they were planning to teach me the show. So, I got there. I had meanwhile arranged housing with the girl who was singing Meg, and just kind of showed up and found myself in this really strange new world of professional musical theater, where a lot of the people claimed to be opera singers, but actually there was only one other person in the cast who was a trained opera singer, and that was Gualtiero Negrini. Do you know that name?
I don't know. Oh,
Well, he had
interesting.
actually he had been one of my predecessors at the Chicago Lyric Opera. He had been in the
Oh,
program there, and actually quite a number of people from Chicago ended up going into Phantom, or they did at the time. It
how
was sort of
funny.
like one of the big jumping off points, and it's actually a great thing to do because. I mean, even if you're singing a leading role, and he was singing the role of Piangi,
Uh-huh.
even if you're doing that, it's 8 shows a week, um, but you're making so much money, and it's not that much singing because musical theater it's 2 hours a week, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
So we it was interesting. It was really interesting to be in a show long term and do hundreds of performances. And
So this was just a production that was based in Los Angeles that would,
well, yeah. So at the time, and they may still do this. I don't know because I don't really keep up with it. But what happens is with shows like that, they're just these big blockbuster hits. They send out companies. They will establish some outposts, and it doesn't happen that often because there aren't often shows that are that big.
mhm.
But Phantom had both bus and truck companies that went toured,
Oh
but it
yeah.
also had this, and I think this was the only other established one. It was in LA,
Hmm.
was an established company. And after we closed there, and they closed after about a 4 year run. I was there for the last 9 months of their 4 year run.
Okay.
Um, then they went up to San Francisco and did the
Oh,
same thing, and were there. It was part of the reason too, is because Phantom is a massively technical show,
yeah.
and so even the bus and truck, they have to specially alter the theaters that it goes to. Like all those little candles that come up out of the ground, those are all traps. So
Hmm.
they just had all these customizations that had to be made. It was better to go in and be in there for a period of time. So we were at the Amundsen Theater. Um, and that year of my life was just all I did was Phantom. And for the first time in my life, I had plenty of money because, you get paid pretty well for those shows, plus benefits.
Hmm.
And I was socking away a lot, and I didn't have a lot to spend money on. I had my own car. My parents had bought me a car, and aside from rent, I wasn't out buying expensive stuff all the time. So I went and had 2 voice lessons a week, and I never really found anybody to coach with out there, but I loved my voice teacher, and
Were you
yeah,
still
that's what I.
balancing operatic repertoire while you were doing the Phantom stuff?
Well, Phantom, you know, the chorus stuff is not expected to be sung. It's expected to be sung operatically.
Oh, okay. I
So
mean,
it's
you would
not
assume that.
really. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I had to watch was not to sing too loud because we were all on mics. I had a little
Right.
head mic, and yeah, I just had to watch that because it was really easy. I mean, I've been singing with the Chicago Lyric Opera Chorus, arguably one of the finest opera choruses, in the
Ever.
world.
Yeah.
And Donald Palumbo was our chorus master. I learned so much from him. He's now at the Met.
Yeah.
And he was one of the people I got to coach with while I was there. So that was amazing. That was one of the best things, was just getting to work with all these amazing people.
Yeah.
And anyway, so it wasn't quite the same singing the Phantom chorus. And I had to hold back a little bit, especially on the mic. I mean, they would turn it down, I'm sure, but there were a couple of times when the conductor was like, just hold back there. So,
Yeah.
but it really, I took over for somebody who was leaving the show, and I didn't have the most active show of anybody. So, I mean, there were other people who had a lot more to do than I did.
Hmm.
But it was fun. It was different. We had a bunch of absolutely crazy fans. Some of them I got to know personally and made some friends with some really lovely people. We did a lot of fun fundraising for things like Equity Fights AIDS
Hmm.
and Broadway Cares and Project Angel Food. And, we did all kinds, and we would get asked to go and do stuff. And it was a real, saying that you were in Phantom was a real like door opener. And
Yeah.
one of those fun things about being there in LA was that um, it was so pretentious. it was so shallow in a lot of ways, which is not to mean that there weren't wonderful people there who were not that way. but there was just kind of this shiny Hollywood veneer over everything. And I swear to God, every day at noon there was a car chase that that came on. It'd be broadcast on television, and you'd be watching the news, and there'd be some car chase or other while you're sitting there eating your lunch.
Wow.
And it just happened every single day. Everything was very sensationalized.
Wow.
But if you, I got things like free meals just because I happened to mention that I was in Phantom. It was
You're a
crazy.
celebrity.
And I was a nobody in this cast. But I'll tell you one funny story about it. I know this isn't the Phantom of the Opera show, but I'll tell you a funny story about it. So, I think it was the first week that I was there, and there's lots of costume changes that take place in the dark, backstage. So everybody basically wears a nude leotard under their clothes. So you just whip off, whip on. You cannot be shy. There's
Right.
not always time to go into a changing booth, and your wig gets changed out a lot, and and some of those things happen really fast, and you just stand there with your arms out and let the dressers put the clothes on
Oh,
you.
yeah, sure.
Well, and the costumes, by the way, are all custom built for you. So one of the things that when I came in, I had to do all these fittings and everything, and I had these beautiful, expensive costumes that were all made for me. Well, the very first one I had on, which I was, basically all in black and standing mostly in the dark for the opening scene around the chandelier. No, it wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. It was the Don Juan triumphant scene. And for some reason, we had trouble getting it on. And I think it's because it was new, I was new, and there was something wrong. We couldn't quite figure out how to get it on. I didn't make it onto stage in time. This is my first week, and I was terrified. I thought I was going to get fired. And nothing happened.
Yeah, it's like how many people knew?
Stage management didn't notice. The company manager didn't notice. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. I mean, yeah, the people who were on stage knew that I wasn't there, but they didn't care either.
Sure.
And it was fine. I mean, I was on mic. I could still sing it, but so it wasn't like they were missing my voice or anything. My body wasn't there.
Yeah.
Well, so, I felt like I dodged a bullet, and I was telling the girls about it in the dressing room. They're like, oh, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. But I walked out of the stage door that night, and there were always fans waiting out there, hoping to catch one of the stars come out.
Right.
But if they couldn't catch a star, they would talk to anybody. And remember, this was my first week. I walk out, and there's this crowd of women going, Cindy, Cindy, Cindy. And I'm just walking by. I thought there was somebody else. And one of my new colleagues nudged me. She said, they're calling you. And I was like, no. Oh, yeah, they're calling you. And finally, I hear one of them say, Cindy, why weren't you on stage in the Don Juan scene? And that was my introduction to Phantom fans.
There's serious people out there looking. Yeah.
Have you ever heard the term Wagner pervert?
Oh, wow. Yeah, sure.
Wagner perverts and Phantom perverts are the same people. They know everything.
Wow.
Everything that happens about their cast. And how they knew that was me walking out of there with no makeup on in street clothes, I don't know.
Wow.
But anyway, that was my introduction to the Broadway life.
You mentioned briefly that you got offered some ring cycles. This is from Lyric or after you had already left Lyric and left Phantom and so forth?
Well, I haven't left Phantom yet. I got offered my first. I didn't get offered a ring cycle to begin with. I was offered a Siegfried was my first. So what happened was, I don't remember how I found out about this, because I certainly didn't have an agent at the time, and we didn't have the internet. But somehow I found out that there was a audition for the ring cycle at Opera Pacific down in Orange, which is now defunct, but down in Orange County.
Yeah.
And so somehow I got an audition for that. I didn't know any better. I think I just picked up the phone and called them. And they invited me to come down. So I actually had to take time off. I had to take one of my days off from Phantom to go and do that, which meant one show, by the way. It didn't mean the whole day. So if you had a show in the afternoon, if you had a matinee and an evening show, that would be 2 days off.
Oh, wow.
So I took one day off and drove down to Orange County, and I did this audition, and it was for Arizona Opera, actually. Henry Holt, Maestro Henry Holt, dear soul, may he rest in peace, was hearing auditions, and there was, and I ended up getting put in this. I think I was auditioning for a Valkyrie, actually. I ended up getting put in this cohort of people. They're balancing voices and listening to. I was auditioning for Die Valkyrie. They were doing it at the Hollywood Bowl. Or at Orange County. I don't remember which. I did a bunch of Wagner out of this one audition. So one of the women who was standing next to me in this audition, this is what it was. It was an audition for Die Valkyrie at Opera Pacific starring Jane Eaglin.
Uh-huh.
And the woman who was standing next to me in the audition called Henry Holt and said, I think I found an Erda for you. And so he was in town, and I went and sang for him the next week. And from that, I was hired to do Siegfried. And from that Siegfried, I was hired to do the entire Arizona ring cycle. And then I came back and did another one.
Wow.
Meanwhile, I also got hired to do a Valkyrie in this Orange County or Opera Pacific one. And then I also got hired to sing scenes from it at the Hollywood Bowl. So I got a lot of Wagner out of this. And that sort of, that took me into that world just kind of right off the bat. And I've always been very grateful to that Valkyrie. She was a Valkyrie. I was actually in all 4 of the Ring operas when they went back and did the whole thing in Arizona. Because what they would do at the time is they'd sort of do a tryout of it earlier. So they did the Siegfried, in January, and then you come back in the summer. They were working their way through the whole cycle. So we did Siegfried. The next year I went back and did Götterdämmerung, and then we put the whole cycle together. So I did all 4. I was Erda in the Ring cycle, and in Rheingold and Siegfried. I was First Norn, and I was Schwertleiter in Die Valkyrie, or Budleiter, as we like to call.
The industry has certainly changed from then until here we are in 20. Well, shoot, I don't even want to talk about what we're doing right now in the industry. But let's say an unmanaged singer who was singing in a musical theater production then launches into a Wagnerian career. I mean, that's just because you picked up a phone, probably a landline at that. It's like how times have changed, right? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So how did you, of course I said we met singing in church choir in Austin, but one of the things, of course, I think a lot of people know you from is your Ask Erda column with Classical Singer. How did that all come about, and what kind of things do you take away from that? And just advocacy for young singers in general. What have you kind of seen trend wise, or what do you think that people need to be doing that they typically aren't, or Get into that circle. That's a big question there.
Sure. With lots of pieces. So let me try to break it down.
Sure.
So first of all, how I started writing for Classical Singer was because I have a big mouth, and I was shooting it off. And it was the early days of the internet. God, this makes me feel so old.
No.
My skunk stripe is very well earned.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember sitting there with my AOL dial-up modem, and this is how I met Christine Gerke, by the way, because I've known her that long. We were both part of an AOL chat room called Zeitgeist, which was, and anyway, so it was for a collection of classical musicians, and that's how, we always commented on stuff. But I always had sort of a love-hate relationship with Classical Singer. But I actually started writing for them before they became Classical Singer. They were still the New York Opera Newsletter. No. And I wrote for them under a pseudonym back then. But what happened was, on some bulletin board or other, I was complaining about what a rag it was.
Mm-hmm.
and how bad the articles were, and that I was actually seriously considering starting my own because I
Wow.
love to write, and I thought I can do a better job than this. And the other thing that had become really apparent to me, really right at the very beginning, was that there was no umbrella resource for singers. And I'd been thinking about this for quite some time about, every time I went to New York, it was such a pain starting out and not knowing where to go, not knowing anything about the city, not knowing how to find the venues that you were supposed to be singing in, or where you were going to warm up, or where you were even going to stay
No
that was
kidding.
affordable. And how do you find a pianist? And back then it was all about connections. I mean, it's still all about connections, but then you asked your voice teacher, and that
Right.
was really all you could do. Now you can go online and you can Google it, but back then all you could do was ask your voice teacher or somebody else that you might know, and that's kind of how I got started out. I used to go sleep on Mignon's couch.
Yeah.
Um, and she was very generous about allowing that, and then just sort of finding my way around town. And my first accompanists and coaches, there were people who played for her studio.
Hmm.
So, and then gradually I started going out from there. But so I was complaining, and Carla Wood, aka CJ Williamson, um, emailed me and said, "Please don't start your own." Please don't start a competing publication. Please come and write for me instead. And so we started talking, and she said, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, and I want to make changes. And she, at that time, was getting ready to take a step back from her own singing career. It wasn't going the way she wanted it to. And I think she wasn't quitting it entirely, but she was sort of taking a step back. And indeed, that's what she did. She took a step back,
Hmm.
and she ended up turning this into Classical Singer magazine. And so I wrote a number of articles under a pseudonym, and then at some point I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I thought, I think that I need to say what I think to the degree that I can
Sure.
in this business, and I don't want to pretend to be somebody that I'm not anymore. I feel dishonest doing that. So I just made a decision that I would do that, and at the same time I was getting enough work that I didn't really want to do the journalistic side of it as much,
Hmm.
like being assigned interviews and things like that. So I said, why don't I write an advice column? There's always these people writing in these questions. So Carla and I kind of figured it out together, and I chose Erda because that was one of my signature roles at the time, and I thought,
Sure.
well, and she's supposed to be all knowing. And the one piece of um, hate mail I ever got from this gig was somebody who wrote and told me how stupid they thought the name was. And that was their whole complaint,
Okay.
was that the
Did
Erda
they?
was a stupid name.
It should be called. No, they probably didn't even give you any ideas here.
No, they didn't.
They
They
just
didn't.
wanted to tell you that it was stupid. Thanks.
They
Thanks so
just
much for
wanted to
your
tell me it
help.
was stupid. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I wrote that column for many years. I don't really write for them anymore. I've kind of just sort of life circumstances. I've trickled away, and it's not run by the same people anymore. But I started my own blog, and I'm writing for Middle Class Singer more and more now. I really
Hmm.
like what
Zach.
Zach Finkelstein is doing with that, and it's Classical Singer has evolved into something, and this is not a criticism at all, but it's really focused on the academia and on beginners, and it's more focused on like all different genres of singing, not just classical, which is
Yeah.
fine. It's great. Um, Zach's stuff is more for people who are out there working, and
Yeah.
I'm more interested in writing about those things now. And in any writing I do that is advice and advocacy, I usually put in my own blog. Or sometimes Zach will
Well,
see that I've written a post or something and say, write that into an article. Let's put
right.
it
And
in.
by the way, I have directed numerous young singers to your website, to your blog. I mean, I don't know if I've ever visited a website that had so much helpful information.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
what is your? Can you just tell us your website address and your blog address if people want to check that out?
Oh, it's super easy. It's www.cindysadler.com. Sadler.
There you go.
And I have to say, it's you're easy. I'm easy to find on the internet. If you Google my name, it'll come up. My website will come up. So,
But for young
yeah, and
singers
then
who might
like
be
the
watching
blogging.
this, oh, I can't even tell you how many incredible resources that can be found on that website. So
Thank you. I
head
appreciate
on
it.
over. Yeah.
Well, I
So
really try to choose those blog topics so that, I mean, sometimes it's focused towards young singers, sometimes it's advocacy, sometimes it's more for the for working singers, and then occasionally I throw in recipes.
well, good. Rightfully so. Rightfully so. Lemmy Pulliam just commented, I'm driving, but I've missed most of this, but I had to jump on and say how much I adore Cindy Sadler. Can't wait to watch later on. Thank you, Lemmy. Appreciate it,
Oh,
man.
Lemmy, thank you. I love you too.
Yeah, what a great guy.
Great
So
guy and amazing voice.
it's funny, New York Opera Newsletter. I forgot that's what it used to be called, but you're totally right. Back in the day, that was the only place where we could figure out who was in town auditioning. That's where you found where the auditions were going to be.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just kind of crazy
And they
how
they worked hard for every one of those listings.
absolutely,
They worked extremely hard for it.
absolutely,
It was a really great service that Carla did to the
yeah,
industry by starting that.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
So after you sort of transitioned to that, I mean, the other thing, of course, which I was delighted to collaborate with you on, was I taught a master class for the Spotlight on Opera. How would you define that? Would you define it as a company? Would you define it as a training program? Would you all of the above?
We like to call it an artistic entrepreneurship program because I think we are technically we're a training program. You pay to attend.
Mhm.
Um, so it is not a young artist program. I consider that something different. That is an apprenticeship where you get paid.
Sure.
I also don't consider us quite just a pay to sing because we're a lot more than it's not just about paying money to get to sing a role. Everybody who comes gets to sing a featured role, but the real emphasis for me and what differentiates it is we really try to provide that information and training that people don't tend to get in school or don't get enough of in school, so that when they leave our program they know things like they know how to put together a press kit, they know something about marketing and branding, sometimes they know a lot about it, they know how to at least start a website. They know how to write for letters of recommendation. They know how to write a cover letter. They know something about working with management and how to approach and when to approach. They know something about repertoire and how to figure out not just what repertoire they are learning and is good for them to work on at the time, but what is going to get them the auditions, and um, how they put forth their best foot in auditions. I find that young singers are often not, they're so busy just trying to learn technique and learn those magic 5 arias that they're supposed to have.
Mhm.
And I tell them, the phase you're in, yeah, you need that magic 5 arias, but when you get out, you need your magic 20.
Mhm.
It's not, you don't go in and sing the same 5 arias. You have, and guess what? You don't have to have one of each flavor in either.
That's
I
that's
will
the thing
audition.
that I think that misnomer where you go through the young artist funnel and you're expected to be everything to every genre to every period of time that has ever been written. Where's your 17th century aria? Where's your 18th century? Where's your 21st century? Where's your French, German, Italian? And then once you pop out on the other side, it's almost like, you know well, what rep do you sing? From a producing organization standpoint, they want their job to be easier. So they want to
Right,
know, like, well, who are you? What are you? What's
right.
your niche? And um, I do have to quote the lovely Stephanie Blythe with her quote of fuck, which I love. No, don't spit your coffee out.
Yeah,
But
I love her.
yeah, yeah. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, it certainly helps managers and it certainly helps producing organizations to know where to sort of pigeonhole. But then, of course, yeah, I mean, I personally would can and would love to sing Handel again. I haven't sung a role in a Handel opera in probably 15 years, but it's something that I can still do well, and it's something I'm still passionate about. No, that's not how the industry views me, right? I sing Verdi and
Right.
Puccini, but I really miss singing Mozart. I really miss singing Handel, and I think that, like what you're saying, it's like, having the stuff that, yes, sort of markets you and defines, your packaging and who you are, but then also, like, some other stuff that's like, also check this out, is super important. And what incredibly important bullet points of things for young artists to sort of leave that entrepreneurship program away with, because that's exactly the stuff that they need to know going into today's industry, which is not, it's not this. You really do have to forge your own path moving ahead. I mean, who knows what the industry is even going to look like on the other side? But I think the more that artists understand that they have the power to put it in their own hands and to create, and not necessarily follow what you and I did, but rather create their own path, and with those tools, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really different world, and that's one thing that this year actually is Spotlight's 15th anniversary season,
Oh wow!
which is really
Congratulations.
thank you. And last year we had to be virtual
Right.
because and this was like any other arts organization, we really got slammed because we had everything cast.
Mm.
We were set that last year to like make another developmental leap forward.
Hmm.
We had 40 students, 45 students and everything, and then COVID. And a bunch of those people just did not want to do a virtual program. They didn't see the benefit of performing virtually. They didn't really understand how it was going to work.
Yeah.
So we end up losing half our student body. And the other half, we were refunded every cent of the money. So, that was a big hit for us. But we ended up bringing on, some people stayed, and then we ended up bringing on more who really wanted to be there. And it turned out to be fantastic
Wow.
because we did virtual concerts every week. We did like Zoom concerts every week, which, it was a little rough, but we had a lot of fun doing it. We ended up getting this regular audience. And we produced operas on film. We did a 90-minute, really fun version of Don Giovanni.
Oh wow.
And we did a children's opera that was really cute that had two different casts, and we did opera scenes, which it was a learning experience for everybody.
Wow.
We and that's the other thing that I love about the company, because now I have faculty who have been with me for many years, and we also had some new people, and we again with the cussing, because we're all adults here, but I got this quote from David Lefkowitz, who's a wonderful stage director, and that is,
Yeah.
"We don't hire assholes here."
Please.
So we
I
just
wish everybody would sort of abide by
we
those.
don't we don't have time for that. So the faculty and the students are all really, we try to make it a familial kind of situation.
Yeah.
So there's nobody that people feel intimidated by. I don't want any faculty members to. I want the students to feel like they can, go to lunch with any
Yeah.
one of
Yeah.
us,
Ask anything.
and we do, and hang out, and just have a good time. I usually don't get to hang out with them because I am so busy, and that's one of my big regrets. I kind of have to have a little distance back from them, but I try to make myself really available, and have office hours and stuff for people. But anyway,
And this is it's the website spotlightonopera.com, or is it?
yes, it is. And
Good.
our auditions are open. They're all by video, and they're open until we've cast everybody. So
That's great. Are y'all
check it
are y'all
out.
planning to have a summer season this time in person, or?
Well, we hope we are going to be able to. Our campus is going to be open, and we're considering it right now. We're going to wait until we're going to make a final decision in April.
Okay.
This program starts in June. I want to see how COVID is doing, basically. We have planned so we can do either. If we don't do a live version, we're going to do a virtual version again. And we're better equipped for it because we learned from our mistakes last
Sure.
year.
Yeah, of course.
And we're going to, we'll hope for the best. The big problem facing us, which is facing any organization right now, but we're very small and don't have a big budget,
Yeah.
is that if one person gets sick in our 4-week program, that shuts it down.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out what to do about that. And I have to make sure that I feel comfortable with the protocols, and I need to talk to some professionals and find out, what they're doing backstage and things like that. So, um,
Now, is this do y'all does this take place in San Marcos? Y'all
we
using the Texas
used to
State?
be we used to be at Texas State, but now a couple of years ago, when I was teaching at Centenary College of Louisiana and I was running the opera workshop there, we moved it there, and it is a beautiful small school in Shreveport.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and we have the run of the music building because there's not a whole lot of people on campus. So we didn't have the conflicts there that we had with Texas State, because Texas State is a big school and they always have a lot of summer programs. And
Sure.
they were very, very generous and really tried to work with us. But this was just a great fit. And Centenary's really excited to have us there. They're able to do a lot for us. We're a benefit to them to have on campus. So
That's
it's
awesome.
it's also great because the dorms are literally right next door, so
Oh, that's
people can.
helpful.
Yeah, you can roll out of bed and be at rehearsal in 5 minutes. So
Wow.
there's a
Wow.
nice little auditorium there. It's great, and so we had been there. We did 2 summers there, and then last year would have been our third year, and
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed that we can be in person. But regardless, we're going to have a program.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And we need to get you back to do another master class.
I would love to. Yeah, I would love to do that. I recently joined the faculty at UMKC Conservatory in Kansas City, and of course, we've been virtual for the most part. I mean, we've been doing a bit of a hybrid, but I'm actually really looking forward to going to campus here once it gets warmer a little bit and do some lessons outside and try to make that work. Everyone, obviously, no matter what role you play in this industry, whether it's performing on stage or teaching or what have you, we're all kind of trying to deal with this. But
Yeah.
we've had some good news recently. We've seen some spikes downward in the amount of cases, and almost everyone in my family has already gotten both vaccinations. So I'm the odd one out. I can't seem to get an appointment, so I'm trying to log on every day and find an appointment. But yeah,
Apparently, HEB is going to be doing
I
something.
know
So
HEB, CVS has already started doing it, and so yeah, I'm thankful that we've got HEBs and CVSs all around here. So hopefully that'll allow us to get back together soon. I mean, I know we're all. I mean, my question that I was just thinking about is what is it that you're looking forward to the most? Moving forward as you look ahead, and of course, the obvious answer is getting back on stage and performing and being able to run your program. And but did I leave something out?
Well, I'll tell you, this is something that not everybody knows. I am in graduate school
Oh,
getting a
really?
master's. Yeah, I'm getting a master's in arts administration from Goucher College, and
Wow.
it's online. This has been a dream of mine ever since I got into the profession. Period. I always thought this is going to be my retirement gig,
Yeah.
and when COVID hit, it was just kind of perfect timing. So I'm halfway through it. And I'm learning so much that I'm so excited to bring this knowledge that I'm learning not only to Spotlight, but to opera as a whole.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen as far as my own singing career. I hope I'm not done. I mean, I'm in great voice, and
Sure.
I'm an honest to God contralto. So I hope I did have a gig that was canceled. I was supposed to sing for Shreveport Opera, which had nothing to do with Spotlight or Centenary, except that well, actually, I didn't even meet them through that. I had auditioned for them years before, but that I was supposed to do a Marriage of Figaro with them. It's the only Mozart opera I get to sing, and I love Marcellina, and I love to sing that opera. And
I'm teaching a class right now where we're focusing on the Da Ponte Mozart operas, and everyone's favorite scene from when I assigned them, to watch the entire show before we started doing a class discussion about it. And Marcellina, the scene, where of course Figaro finds out that Marcellina is his mother and that Bartolo is his father. That whole thing was everyone's favorite moment. I mean, I think Marcellina, if I could play a role in the Marriage of Figaro from a different voice type, different gender, I think Marcellina would take the cake. I think that must be an incredibly fun role to play.
It is, but you know what? I hated it the first time I sang it.
Why?
Well, because I first sang it in my one semester of grad school as a vocal performance major.
Oh, okay. Well.
And Marcellina is not a role that should be played by a young woman.
Hmm.
It's very well. She's not a young woman.
And of course.
She's not, and a young woman can't really understand. And often the way I see this, I'm going to get on the soapbox here, Weston. Watch out.
Mhm.
So we often see her played in a very stereotypical way. She's supposed to be this funny old lady, and usually isn't particularly attractive. And I think that's really wrong. My take on Marcellina is that she is the cougar of Seville.
I love that.
And she
That's a
was,
trilogy waiting to happen.
well, I mean, yeah, she should have her own opera. I mean, look, she slept with everybody when she was younger. She's not ugly. She was a hottie
Right?
in her day, and now
Sure.
she's sort of like one of those Real Housewives. Everything's just a little too much. The hair is a little too red.
Uh-huh.
The it's a little too low cut.
Uh-huh.
She's a little too everything.
I love that.
And yeah, and I think it's just a lot of fun to play her that way. And then what you have to love about her though is that she's this scheming character for the first half, and then she switches on a dime
Yeah.
and becomes like Tiger Mom, and she's very warm. And all of a sudden, and I have to tell you one little anecdote about this because he recently passed away. Thomas, and how can I forget his last name? Hammonds, Tom Hammonds. Do you know him?
Well, I love
Wonderful.
them.
Yeah. So I got to do, actually, the last Figaro that I did was in New Orleans, and he was my Bartolo.
Okay.
And he's the only one that ever played that EO thing sincerely.
Hmm.
And it was such a beautiful moment. I know that's a big laugh moment, and people love to laugh at it. And he
Yeah, yeah,
said, "No,
sure.
I really think that he loves her." And he did this. He almost made me cry on stage in that moment. The way he just took my hand and he bent over it and he kissed it, and as he said, "EO," and it was magic. And that's something that only a real artist can do.
Yeah.
Take a moment like that is supposed to be, everybody expects it to be a certain way,
Right.
and then you just turn it on its head and do your own thing with it. And if I have one message for young artists, which I don't, I have lots of messages, but one message that I would love to pass on to young artists is it's really important that you don't play the character the way it's always been done, or that you think it should, somebody else thinks it should be done. You have
Preach.
to find your own characterization.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you're going to enjoy this, especially if you're a character singer. And I do a lot of character roles. I get to do some leading roles too.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of funny old ladies. I have always done funny old ladies, even when I wasn't an old lady. And, you have to find that thing that makes them real.
Right.
Same thing with Gertrude in Romeo and Juliet. I do a lot of those.
Sure.
I have a take on her that's my own take, and I've never had a director tell me, no, we can't do that. And my take on her is that she and Gregorio are going at it.
That's
They
amazing.
have this affair going on, and it, God knows that opera needs a few laughs. It
Something.
doesn't have very many. And so that whole balcony scene,
Yeah.
if you have Romeo and Juliet going at it, and underneath, with Juliet keeps it down. That's my take
Amazing.
on her.
That's funny.
And it's just fun.
You mentioned the EO and the artistry behind that. It reminds me of I've sung the role of Sharpless a lot, and there's the moment when we meet Chocho-san, and there with Pinkerton, we're sort of Sharpless is leading the way, like let's find out a little bit about her, and as we're talking, Sharpless's line is "E ci avete sorelle," which is, "Do you have any sisters?" And that always gets a laugh. Like everyone's assumption is it's like, oh, Sharpless wants some geisha loving too. And I think
Hmm.
I try my hardest in that moment, like you were saying about Thomas, the way that it's like the sincerity of the delivery of the line. I mean, the point is not for it to be funny. I think in that moment, Sharpless is trying to find out about this woman because he understands that she is sincere with her offerings with Pinkerton. She doesn't think that this is all a big joke. That's him,
Hmm.
right? That's what he
Yeah.
thinks. And so, yeah, there's a few moments in you know performance life, whether it be an opera or theater or whatever have you, where, yeah, it's like, okay, well, traditionally it can be done this and this always gets a laugh, so let's build this up. Well, why not? Let's look at it from maybe from a different angle and see if we can't tell a different side of the story. And I love the take on Gertrude. I two thoughts about that. Again, with the Sharpless thing, I always play him as an alcoholic who is really, really struggling with the fact that, well, he lost his arm in the war, and so that he's having to deal with that. That's why he got the desk job as this sort of, you know, consulate there in Nagasaki. Perhaps he himself had already fallen in love with a geisha, maybe even had a family that ended because of his alcoholism, and so now he sees this happening all over again with Pinkerton. And so, I always ask the director, I'm like, can I bring a flask? Is that okay? So in those moments where he has to, knock on the door, can I come in and tell you all this news? He has to take a flask, has to do a little nip. But I think that we have to create those types of specificity within the character so that it doesn't just become, oh, here's another production of whatever, right? We have to
Yeah.
add our own artistry to it. And I think that's personally what I miss the most right now is being able to uniquely create something with an ensemble of others that are there to do the
Yeah.
same, and to share that, most importantly, with the audience, and feel that symbiotic energy with a crowd of live people who are there, where we are supporting them and they
Yeah.
are supporting us, and we're all kind of creating together. And that's what I miss so
Yeah.
desperately. Anyway,
Preach.
yeah, right.
Yeah. I love what you're saying about Sharpless. That also, the alcoholism also explains why he doesn't really do anything about it. He
Right.
tries, but
Anything, right.
ultimately he doesn't really take any forceful action. And you
Right.
wonder why, because he's such a kind man.
Right. Right.
He's
Right.
obviously so, he cares about Pinkerton up until the end when Pinkerton, he realizes that Pinkerton is a coward.
Right.
I saw a really great production of this at Austin Opera the last time they did it, and it was the only time that I've ever felt like Pinkerton was not shown to be like really sympathetic in some way. He was just kind of a jerk, and
Mm.
it was very clear. And nobody really had any sympathy for him by the end. And I thought that's the way it should be. Nobody should have
Yeah.
sympathy for him. Whereas the Sharpless was really touching. It was Michael Chioldi. He was
Yeah.
really really warm. And anyway,
Sure.
great piece. I only got to do Suzuki one time, but it was a lot of fun.
Oh, props queen, right? I mean,
Props
that's
queen. Yeah,
exactly what it was all about.
yeah. The
Well,
ultimate
listen.
KDJ role.
Exactly. Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and talking to us about all the things. I really appreciate it, and I think that anybody who tuned in learned a whole handful. So good luck with the remainder of your arts administration master's degree. That's exciting, and I'll look forward to seeing how Spotlight turns out. Hopefully, we can all be in person this summer. And yeah, please keep me posted. I'd love to come work with your kids again. That would be amazing. So
Yeah, we've never actually sung together except for the church choir, so
I
that
know,
has to
right?
change.
We need to fix that. We need to make that
Yeah.
happen. So, all right. Well,
Thanks for
hey,
having me on,
absolutely.
Weston. This
It's
has been a
always a
lot of fun.
pleasure. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.